In the late 1800s, a new game came out, and it became very controversial. This game was called a Ouija board. Has anybody heard of a Ouija board? Do not worry, we're not going to play it in church because churches said, no, this is divination, and it's going to open a door to the demonic, so you should not play with a Ouija board. But I was 12 years old, and I didn't know anything about a Ouija board, and I got one for my birthday. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, a Ouija board is just a flat game board that has an alphabet on it, and it has 0 through 9 numbers on it. It has a couple symbols, and it comes with this heart-shaped planchette, which glides along the top of this board, and all the players put their fingertips very lightly on the planchette, and then one of you asks a question, and the board is supposed to spell out the answer to your question. So at 12 years of age, I'm having a birthday party, and somebody gives me a Ouija board, and it is a used one. It's one that is old. It was bought at an estate sale. I didn't know anything about it. My friends wanted to play it, so we played it, and we asked it the most important question: who is Judy going to marry? Because that's what we all wanted to know, right? So all my girlfriends, we put our fingers on this planchette, and it spells out, not Keith, who I married, but the name was Steve. Well, Steve just happened to be an 8th grader I had a crush on, right? And his sister was playing the game with me. So we were 100% sure that we were pushing the planchette around the board. Now, there's actually a scientific name for that. I think it's called idiomotor skills, where your brain is thinking something and your muscles move kind of without your brain knowing. So you feel like this thing is just gliding around on the board, but actually you're pushing it, okay? But one of my girlfriends that day went home and told her mother that we played with a Ouija board, and her mother was very upset and told her daughter, you're never going over there again, you cannot play with that game anymore because the devil's gonna come onto you if you play this Ouija board game. She called me and told me what her mother said, and I thought, well, it wasn't that great of a game anyway. I still didn't completely buy what they were telling me about the devil, but I stuck the board in the back of my closet. You know, we have this feeling like if somebody gives us a gift, we don't want to just, take it to Goodwill or something. So I put it in the back of my closet, didn't say anything to anybody about it, just kind of forgot about it. Until a few weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I felt like there was a presence in my closet, and it scared me a little. And then a few nights later, I felt it again. And after a while, I began to wonder if it was that Ouija board. So I got on the phone with my girlfriend, and I said, I'm feeling like there's something in my closet. And she said, oh, it's that Ouija board. You've got to get rid of it. Now, I didn't tell anybody, because I was 12 years old, and you're too old to have a boogeyman in the closet or a monster under the bed, right? So I didn't say anything to anybody. Nobody in my family knew about it. But I made a plan, because this thing was starting to scare me a little. Now, in our reading today, we have a walking Ouija board. We have a guy that comes into the synagogue where Jesus is teaching, and he has a demon. And it's a fascinating short little story from Mark's gospel. Now, you remember from Mark, I hope you remember, that almost everything in Mark's gospel happens immediately or at once. Mark is real dramatic that way. At once, there's a man with a demon. However, that's not exactly what the Greek says. The Greek says it's not that there's a man with a demon walking into the Bible study. There's a man in a demon. That just adds a level of creepiness to the story, that the demon is fully in charge and this man is captured. He's a prisoner. And the demon takes him to Bible study and confronts Jesus. And then Jesus, of course, says, be silent. Is that what you read? Be silent. And you know what I'm going to say next. According to scholar Joel Marcus, that is not what Jesus said. Jesus said something more like, shut up, or shut your trap. He did not say, be silent. Now, bless the hearts of our translators. They want us to have a really nice, clean, sanitized Jesus that we can follow and love and pray to. But that's not what Jesus said. Jesus was abrupt. It was a slang. It definitely was not be silent. So they have this exchange, and then Jesus casts the demon out, setting the man free. And everyone is amazed by the authority that Jesus has. Now, Mark's audience, that time and place, they were used to demons. The demon in this story did not upset any of Mark's audience, none of his listeners. Demons were a dime a dozen back then because there were so many parts of life that were unexplainable. And when too many things happened to you, like maybe you had a seizure or you became ill or some bad luck befell you, it was common for people to say, oh, that was a demon. That was an evil spirit. Or you did something and God is not happy, and so this demon has been sent to afflict you. That was still common when Jesus was teaching. And so when Mark's audience heard this story, they didn't pause at all about this demon that walks into the Bible study. They would have just taken that for granted. In fact, today, maybe we have a few demons that walked into worship. I don't know. But for Mark's audience, it wasn't a surprise. For us, though, when we read a story like this, we don't quite know what to do with the demon, do we? Now, we have some point of reference from movies like The Exorcist and Poltergeist, right? We have a little fascination with things that are demonic, but we can't really categorize it or classify it. So we tend to spend way too much time on this demon. Now, what is a demon? I mean, I don't really know for sure, but I can tell you what I found in my reading this past week. I can just report to you, and you can decide if it's worth knowing or not knowing. But what we think about these evil spirits is important because it is part of our faith structure, our system of belief that we talked about last week when we played the Jenga game. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, listen to the message from last week so you can get up to speed with us. But a demon, according to an author like Eckhart Tolle, and even according to some of our New Testament writers, sounds like a collection or a density of negative energy. Something that is not here to help, to love, to be constructive or supportive or accepting. Something that is here to destroy, something that has evil intent, something that is angry, and something that makes us afraid. So that's one possible explanation of the demon. Now, there could have been some kind of collection of energy that was attached to that Ouija board. It was an old board, it came from who knows where, and maybe I really did sense something in my closet. I don't know, but what I do know is that I was afraid. It made me afraid to have that thing in my closet. So I waited until everybody at my house was gone somewhere one day, the rare occasion when I was home alone, and I mustered up all the courage my little 12-year-old self could muster up, and I got that board out of my closet, and I took it to the burn barrel in the backyard, and I set it on fire. And I did not wait around to watch it burn. I ran away from it, terrified, because I thought, if there's an evil spirit attached to this board, what if it jumps out and it's looking for a new place to live? I'm not going to be anywhere near. So I ran back in the house and I hid. And after that, I slept. I didn't wake up anymore. I didn't feel any presence in the closet. Now, there's another possible explanation, what a demon is, and I like this one quite a bit. It's simply a stronghold in your mind. It's a thought form. It's something that you believe and you have put a little bit of faith into, but this thought form is destructive. It causes you to fear, and it makes you not do what you know God wants you to do. Now, is it possible that when my girlfriend called me and said, oh, my mom said there's a devil attached to that Ouija board, that thought was planted in my mind so that a few weeks later, I began to sense a presence in my closet? That's possible too. Does it make it any less real? No. It's still real. If we perceive something, it is our reality. And if someone tells you, I think there's a presence in my apartment, and you say, oh, that's all in your mind, that's called gaslighting. When somebody shares something with you that is important to them, especially something that makes them feel vulnerable or afraid, it's their reality, and we should not respond like, oh, that's all in your head. It might be in their head, but it's real. It's a real construct in their mind. So I don't know what exactly that Ouija board had, if there was anything that you might call scientific. I'm sure not. But there was a sense of fear, and that was real. Now, what does faith and fear have to do with one another? And what do we see in the story of Jesus? Because as I read it, I don't see any fear in Jesus at all, or in anybody else in the synagogue, right? Linda did a great job of reading that demon voice kind of mean. Because when I studied what the demon said this week, I was a little bit surprised by what I found. Again, bless the hearts of those translators. When the demon said, Jesus of Nazareth, that's like saying Linda of Jackson, Michelle of Albion, Daryl of wherever you live, Daryl Jackson. It doesn't really tell us much about a person other than what their address is. And that's not what the Greek says. In the earliest manuscripts in Mark's gospel, the Greek here says Nazarite. The demon says, what do you want with us, Jesus the Nazarite? And that is very different than Jesus from Nazareth. A Nazarite is someone who takes a holy order, someone who has taken a vow. And the best example of a Nazarite is in the Old Testament, and that's Samson. Samson, the strongest man in the Old Testament, was a Nazarite, never cut his hair, never drank alcohol, and he was super strong. But all that had to happen to him to take his power away was for his hair to be cut. So when the demon says, Jesus the Nazarite, he's saying, the strongest man in the world wasn't strong anymore. All we had to do was cut his hair. And we can do the same to you. Who do you think you are? The Holy One of God? Very different vibe here. The demon is trying to instill fear in Jesus. And Jesus says, shut your trap. I'm not listening to that. Because he knows that if fear comes into him, faith does not stay. Fear and faith do not live in the same place. They don't have the same address. When we are living in fear, we are not living in faith. And that is all I want you to remember today. Because so much of our lives we live in fear. I've noticed in the last week, all I have to do is listen to or scroll the news on my phone, and it can bring up a lot of fear about what is happening in our country and what path we are taking. And there are particular people in power that when we see them, we may feel fear. And when we are in that fear, we are not living in the faith that Jesus modeled for us in this reading today. So my question for you this morning is, what are you afraid of? When you're lying in your bed at night, if a thought that makes you feel afraid comes to you, what is it about? Because I think most of us are very afraid about the future. We don't know what's going to happen to us. We don't know what's going to happen to our family. We don't know what's going to happen to our church or to our country. And if we dwell in that space and let all those voices come in, we will be responding from a place of fear. And that is not good news. That is not what Jesus came to teach us to do. He wants us to be able to separate the demon from the person, so that even when we see a person who causes us to be afraid, that we can separate the demon, the thought form, the thinking, away from the human and send love to the human. Pray for the human. Pray for your enemies and bless them, right? You cannot do that if you have demonized them. If you look at an entire people group like they did during the Holocaust and demonize them, you can't love them. You only want to destroy them because that's what that thought form that negative energy calls you to do. And you can't respond in faith. I was challenged this week by God as I thought about a person that I will admit causes me to be afraid. And God said, can you love that person? And I couldn't. All I had was fear. And then I realized what this story is teaching us is to separate the human from the demon. And once we do that, the human is just a person just like us. A person that God loves. Someone worth loving. And then I realized I had moved from fear to faith. And I could love that person. Now, some of us are afraid of the past. Something that happened in our past, who knows how long ago, it's still following us around, and we still make all of our decisions based on that past event. That needs to go straight to the burn barrel. Our fear about what happens in our future, much of that needs to go straight to the burn barrel. We need to be able to separate the demon from the human, and it starts here in our own minds. And the way we notice it is fear. When we're in fear, we're not building our faith. And I think that's really what Jesus wants to tell us today. So let me give you just a few seconds to think about this. What are you afraid of? And how can you love more?